and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about dementia change. We will.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks. I'm so glad you're able to join us today. You're going to learn a lot today from our guests. We are going to be talking with a caregiver and also a health and wellness coach. And we're going to be discussing how to co-create caregiver success. And there's just so much insight between both of these ladies. They have each walked the journey with dementia. And so before I introduce you to our guests, I want to just give a shout out to Twiddle. Twiddle has sensory aids for people that are just absolutely wonderful. So if you're dealing with sundowning or someone who's really fidgety and anxious, their products are absolutely excellent. Now, you can go to the number 4twiddle.com. That's 4twiddle.com for more information. And I would also recommend that you check out our site, Alzheimer's Speaks. We have all kinds of free educational resources, as well as our sister company, Dementia Map, where you can search information for services, products, and tools around the world. You can read some amazing articles, and you can also sift through our glossary of terms. We're here to help. So please let us do that. It's all free and accessible to you. So let's go ahead and introduce you to our guests today. Well, I am so excited to have these two ladies with us today. We are going to be talking about co-creating caregiving success, and who out there doesn't want that? It's such an isolating position that we step into, or sometimes are forced into, and the emotional range is just kind of psychotic at times, from highs and lows. And how do you balance it all, and how do you move forward and make the right decisions? And we're gonna talk with Mary, who cares for her husband, and Paula, who is a caregiver and a health and wellness coach, and how they've worked together to really make a positive difference in caring for Roger. So, Mary, I'm going to have you introduce yourself first, if you don't mind.
I'm Mary Farquhar, and my husband, Roger, was initially diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment in October of 2018. And currently he's in the severe stage of Alzheimer's, which is not the end of life stage of Alzheimer's. So.
And how long has he been living with dementia, Mary?
He probably had signs a couple years before we did a neuropsych evaluation. So I would say we're in our 7th year of this, and he currently is in memory care.
Okay, thank you. And Paula, you want to give people a little background on yourself?
Sure. I am a health and wellness coach, and my primary population is other caregivers, because my life has been touched so much by the care that my husband needs. He got his Alzheimer's diagnosis in 2013, so we're headed into year 12, and he still lives at home with me, and he's 92. So I had no idea this would be going on well into his 90s. And yeah, it's been life-altering for both of us.
Okay, great. Mary, I'm going to go back to you. Do you want to talk a little bit more about your journey with Roger and what that felt like to get that diagnosis? Was there signs prior to the diagnosis? How did he accept it? Those types of things?
When he retired at age 70, and I really noticed, I just thought he was depressed. He just wasn't, he was a marathon runner, but you can only run so many miles, and he just wasn't himself. And the things like, oh, he stopped paying bills that he always paid. That's, one of those top 10 signs of dementia. And I kept saying, ask your doctor, ask your doctor. And of course he'd forget. So I actually went with him to his primary care doctor and said to the doctor, I really want his memory tested, not even necessarily knowing what it was. And so we were referred to a neuropsych evaluation, and I used precise language because one of the frustrating things at the time, and this was 7 years ago, is nobody wants to call it Alzheimer's. They want to eliminate everything else first, and that's very helpful. However, so the official verbiage was his frontal temporal cortex had shrunken consistent with someone like Alzheimer's. So when I would go to doctors or the neurologist, I would use that phrase, and I found I would get more information from them back as to what are we dealing with here. And 2018 was before COVID. Just kind of briefly, Roger has never accepted his Alzheimer's diagnosis. He doesn't know he has Alzheimer's. He's always surprised if I say, well, it's because of your Alzheimer's. I have Alzheimer's. Yes, you do. And I think that's kind of a regret, is not going into some type of counseling to have someone, when he was more aware, to have that is really explained. What we did do, which was really helpful, is I took this phenomenal workshop called Caregiver Roadmap, and it was run by Catherine Engstrom, who worked for the Wilder Foundation. She wrote a grant with an occupational therapist, Sue Ryan, and what it did for me is they gave us, and we took our care partners to Sue to do a cognitive performance test. And the one thing I just always say to people, especially people who are afraid of diagnosis, ask your GP. They can refer you to an occupational therapist. This test is very practical. So, for example, they'll say, here's a closet with rain, and it's raining outside. Put on a raincoat, do this, do this, do this. And I repeated this test for 3 years, and I could see where Roger was declining from year to year. For example, putting on the women's raincoat instead of the men's raincoat. That was a marker of, he's losing, the ability to differentiate. So I just can't say enough about that class, which unfortunately I cannot find it offered anyplace right now. But what it gave me was, you always hear Alzheimer's is a marathon. Well, not really, because when the marathon, where you have, where it's going to dip, where the water stations are, and I just find that, but what I did get a sense was this was an illness. This was a terminal illness. And I went into, okay, kind of like how to interpret the measures in terms of, I know very few that can take care of their person at home. Paula might be one of them, all the way through this illness, versus when do you get home health care in, and now my husband is in memory care, and that was such a hard decision. So that's some, and just briefly, all people out in podcast land, I feel like there isn't anything I haven't been through, whether he wanted to run out of the house naked, or he wandered, or I had to have him hospitalized. We went through geri psych. I mean, I put him in memory care. I brought him home out of memory care. They say never to do that. I did it. And part of all of this was exacerbated by COVID. I don't think he would have gotten, I want to say so psychotic, except everything in our life, like everywhere else in the world, shut down. And that it was hard on me, but I didn't realize how hard that was for him. So, so that's kind of, I want to say, a brief overview. I also took a course called Shaping Your Future, which was offered by Family Means, and it'll be offered again in March. And that was also, how to approach driving, when to stop driving. That's one of the things they covered, as well as the financial, the legal. And we did that in 2019, and it was for couples, and it was such a helpful class in terms of, this is a long illness, and how am I going to navigate it for years, not just for 30 miles, but for 30 miles every year for 7 years, 11 years, however long this may take. And just briefly, what I was doing, I would write Christmas letters, and kind of honest Christmas letters. That mine this year hasn't come out. It'll be a Valentine's letter. But I was writing just to anyone, just kind of really what life was like for me. And a friend of mine, his wife knew Paula and said, Mary, I think you could benefit from Paula. And I will be honest with y'all, it's like, I looked at her website and it said caregiving from balance, from survival to thriving, finding balance and joy. And I was like, oh my God, I am so not there. I can't even call this woman, And part of it, and this is, I think, true for a lot of caregivers, is like, I was dealing with Roger, but also Roger's stepson, who has schizoaffective disorder, and we had to make decisions about Mark's long-term future, possibly without his dad, and what was that going to look like. And I didn't even want to admit to people I wasn't caregiving for one person. I was caregiving for two people, and I was exhausted and struggling. And I knew that feeling of, as caregivers, we always think we're failing. That's just kind of, I think, part of the gig. But I just knew I wasn't going to last if I physically wasn't going to last unless I changed some things. So I called Paula, and I will tell you, in the first intake, it's like, oh my God, this woman gets me. She's lived it. She knows. I don't want to cry, but she knows me. And I just, at that point, I needed that. So
thank you for being so vulnerable. That is, I understand that she gets me, because we hide it. More because we're going to be strong and we're going to fill this role and stuff like that. And I know for me, I felt like I was kind of sharing with people, and I really wasn't in a really honest fashion. Right. And so then I would get more frustrated, like, why don't they see this? Why aren't they helping me?
Why aren't they helping me?
Exactly. And it was real easy to blame somebody else for that. It was what I found. So thank you for that, because I think there's a lot of people out there, when you said that phrase, she gets me, because that is a very rare feeling, especially nowadays, to feel accepted and understood and not judged. You know, just there for you. So thank you. And
also for me, not somebody just telling me what a great job I was doing, which made it even harder for me to say, I'm not really doing I'm not feeling so good right now, So anyway, yeah.
Well, good. Paula, do you want to give us a little background in your caregiving journey with your husband?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. Jack and I met over the phone. And we were both in professional development fields at the time. And quite honestly, we had a brain connection. That's where we fell in love. It wasn't, physical. It wasn't, oh, what a cute guy. It was, what a bright fellow. And we connected over 40 years ago. And I think having him experience Alzheimer's has been one of the saddest things in my life. And I really sense in my clients that they don't know how much grief they're in. Because right in front of you, this person who you care about, who you love, perhaps whom you married to, or was your father or mother, is losing critical aspects of who they are or who you knew them to be. And that's probably been the most heart-wrenching part of this journey for me. Jack was brilliant. And even after his neurodiagnostic testing, he could still do the math computations way better than I could. It was just part of the way his brain worked and what he held on to. They would say count back by sevens, and he could do that. And I'm thinking, I don't know that I could do that. But now he is in probably stage 6, if you think of the 7-stage format. He goes to daycare 3 days a week. And for me, that is a godsend. That gives me 18 hours a week to focus on my business and other chores and my own health needs, my own health appointments, to occasionally go out to lunch with a friend. If I didn't have those 18 hours, I would be, as Mary described herself, in that overwhelmed state. I went into coaching because I saw his decline. So I've been a registered nurse for 50 years. And I knew that I would no longer be able to work a corporate job as his needs increased. So I was hunting around for what can I do after retirement, because I suspect I won't get to pick my retirement date. That will be dictated by his needs. And I had the privilege of working with a health coach at my place of employment. She was doing her internship there. And I came away from that experience. I think I did 5 sessions with her. And I came away from that thinking, well, that was really helpful. And, oh my gosh, I could do that. She has a nursing background. I have a nursing background. I need to look into this. So that was 2017. By 2018, I was at the University of Minnesota doing their certificate in health and wellness coaching. And by 2020, I had graduated. And I opened my business right before the pandemic at the end of 2019. Because I've been an educational consultant, I opened that and simply added the coaching once I was credentialed for that work. But it has been a godsend to be able to work from home and to be able to still be in human services work. And I truly believe that without Jack's experience of Alzheimer's and without his ongoing illness, I wouldn't have nearly the insight that I have when clients tell me what's on their mind and what's troubling them most. And in coaching, because it's not counseling and it's not psychotherapy, I really look at what are the probing questions I can use to pull out the inner wisdom of that client. Because at our core, we know what we need. We're just not always able to take the time and the moment to look at that honestly.
Oh, and I think that's so true. I also think people really appreciate someone who's been in the trenches versus someone who is kind of book theory, or this is what they've been told to say, and they get the emotional side of this, because without the emotional understanding, it's, in my mind, it's really hard to help people. That emotional connection is so critical. You can give them tasks to do, but if you can't explain the relief or why you're doing it or how it can change, or all of those types of things, and just accepting whatever emotions they're feeling, because we don't express our emotions often. There's not a lot of safe places to be able to do that. And then when you get to a chronic illness that's very different from a lot of other things, it's not like cancer. There's not a protocol that we're going to go down, per se, in terms of this. It's, some people think this drug is great and some people don't. And that's really about all the options you get half the time. You might get connected with an association if you're lucky, but you're not connected typically to people that get it. And to me, I found that to be a critical piece. And actually, that's why I created Alzheimer's Speaks. Was, my mom lived with dementia 30 years, and I kept going, where are the others like us? Come on, they got to be out here someplace, And you're just like, I don't understand why organizations weren't connecting people to services, products, and tools along with people. I mean, there were support groups out there, but they were, in my opinion, very rigid and structured in terms of what was said and how they went. And I just felt like I needed friends, I needed peers, I needed to be able to go off course and let them go off course so that they could express their emotions and what they were going through and troubleshoot together and kind of get that tribal spirit pumping, where you're not alone and there's other people supporting you. So I was, Mary's talked about you many times in our support group, and anytime there's a way to squeeze you in, she does, because she's like, this is life changing, guys.
Yeah.
And yet I think people are scared of it. They just kind of how they're scared of going to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I think there's a taboo of, no, I can do this on my own. I don't need help. Though, where is my help? We're screaming inside at the same time.
I think the other thing, Lori, is that I think for caregivers, we have to know we're worth it, and when we're in trouble, when our bodies are telling us, you're not going to last, you got to do something different here. And that's, yeah. And I think with Alzheimer's, unlike other diseases, if other people, if you say you have cancer, they're going to be compassionate. Mm-hmm. If you say you have Alzheimer's, they're going to back off. There's still that. It's a brain, body, and I think, unfortunately, so many families have had such miserable experience with Alzheimer's that if and when they live through it, they don't want to talk about it again. They don't want to be involved again. And they can often have the knowledge, but this is part of, in working with Paula, the first thing she had me do were these gratitude practices. And, I'm kind of the glass is half empty person. So I'm like, okay, I'll try to be grateful, but it did work, and it really started, okay. And I have so much to be grateful for, but part of it, and I did another podcast with you when there were all these big name people, and then there was me, and they all had these big titles, and so I decided to call myself the CEO of Rogers Care, and knowing that memory care is, between $6,000 to $16,000 a month, it's like, yeah, we are CEOs, yeah, we're going to pay someone else $100,000 a year. Well, yeah, we can afford to take care of ourselves, and that also really helped me, like, yeah, I can afford, a health and wellness coach. I deserve one. I need one. And, that's part of what I'm always, in our caregiver support groups, and it's so easy to fall into that. I don't have time. I don't, and it's like, but you got to make it, if you're going to, and, have a quality of life. And I feel like, and I felt, I had in some ways, and that's part of the conundrum, other people thought I was doing relatively well with all that I was doing, which, was somewhat true. But getting down to that core of, and Paula was always like, but Mary, what about you? What kind of life do you want to have? And like the first couple of weeks, I'd be like, oh, what do I want? Really? What do I want? Can I think about this for a couple of weeks? Because it has been so long since I have thought about what do I want that, it was just, if nothing else, it was just good to think about that. And that started to bring clarity to me.
Yeah, I never thought about that at all. I mean,
Mhm.
there's not time, so
Right.
it's kind of like raising kids. You put yourself the last at the totem pole and you're
Mhm.
getting all the other stuff done. And I remember people saying, and this was after my dad died, who had brain cancer, and I was still caring for my mom with dementia. Even though she was living in a community, you're still responsible and there's still lots to oversee. And people are like, well, what do you like to do? What? 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 Like to do? Really? And I was just like you with that question. It was like, I have no idea. I've not asked myself that question in so many years. I mean, it was like a foreign object dropping into my world. I mean, it was, and then when you look back and when someone asks you that question and you realize how out of sorts that is, it really slaps you in the face of, boy, I really am out of balance, that I can't answer that simple question, that there's not one or two things that just come to mind. I was like glad when I could, get a shower or get my hair cut or, those types of things some days during the caregiving moment. Now, Mary, one of the questions I was going to formally ask you, and you touched on this already, but I just want to see if there's anything else you wanted to add, was how you met Paula. And it sounded like you were referred to her from a friend.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that, or?
I don't think, no, well, the funny part of it is that, I was sending letters and it was to one of my good college friends, and his wife read the letter and referred me to Paula, and, her name's Rika Konstam, and she runs grief circles with another woman, Larry Swanson. So Rika referred me to Paula, and then Paula referred me back to Rika, and I did a grief circle, which I spent, when I knew, and this was after dealing with a year of total incontinence, and what changed was my husband no longer wanted to walk, and I just knew I can't be lifting him. I just, it's like this is, this is serious. But I cried by myself every day for a year, thinking I was going to have to put him in memory care. And Paula referred me back to Rika for this grief circle was really so helpful. Because, well, anyways, it was extremely, extremely helpful. And now, the one thing though, nobody ever tells you about memory care, and I'm at Rogers at a facility. It's only memory care. It's not a continuum of care. It's memory care. Is what a wonderful community I have with other families, and I call them my peeps. But I see Roger, but I see I see Louis and Nikki, and I see all my friends. They're my friends too, and their daughters or their wives. It's a community, and I know you do have to look, and I'm lucky that I have found the place where he is. Love it. But some, people don't. I don't know. They don't present it that way, and it's part of it is who I am and what I will build around me. But it's just so appreciative of having a new set. probably if you have kids and you're a soccer mom, you do meet the other moms and dads, and there's a community that can form. So anyway.
Yeah. No, and that is something that communities should pitch. That's really important to families, really important to families. And it makes people not be so afraid of even reaching out or interacting with some of the other residents and family members, and because everybody's kind of dying to talk to one another. And it's like, but somebody has to be brave enough to reach out. I loved what you talked about with the grief circle. And Paula, you had mentioned that originally, that a lot of people don't understand the grief in this, and there's this ambiguous loss, which is constant loss of little things. And so often I think we look at loss as great big things, or somebody passing, and there's all these little things, like somebody can't pick out their raincoat, they pick out their wives. That is just crushing. That that is a loss of ability. And that's not really talked about a whole lot. Everyone focuses on memory, but it's all these little things that can occur. So Paula, I wanted to talk with you. It sounded like you got into health coaching and wellness from your work and seeing someone else doing it and taking advantage of it. And I loved that you said how helpful it was, but also that you had this realization, I could do that. I could do that. I could help other people through this. What was that like when you kind of found that space, that niche that you could drop into? Because I'm sure you were worried about not being able to work, and everyone worries about finances and life adjustments, and even if you're sitting on a pile of money, it's that purpose that you have with the job and things. So what was that like for you to find that health and wellness coaching sector for you?
Well, like most of the world, I was not familiar with coaching. When you say the word coach, I thought of the soccer coach, the sports coach, the guy who, took care of the kids after school hours and ran the sports program. I didn't know anything about coaching until this experience. And the field is growing, and it's gaining in gravity and significance, but it's still pretty small. Especially coming from a field like nursing that's a couple of 100 years old. To be in a field that's maybe only 10 or 15 years old, it was a curious step. It was a little like, okay, what's this going to feel like? But that the university has a program that's at the master's level gave me a lot of confidence in what they were doing. And so for most students, it is a master's degree. In Minnesota, they permit you to go and get the certificate if you're already a licensed health professional. So walking in with my nursing license, I didn't have the full field of study. I'd already finished my graduate work. All I needed was the certificate time. And that felt really very reassuring in terms of being able to build on what I already had and simply be adding the component that health coaching brought.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Mary, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the most important things that you want to cover that you feel are lacking for caregivers out there?
Well, I think we kind of touched on a lot of them. It's the length of this illness. It's having, whether it's your true friend or, I do encourage, people to have a coach, and now I have a spiritual director, because I sought him out because it was, I need the spiritual muscle to get through the final phase, and that's something else that memory care has given me, as I've seen a lot of people die of Alzheimer's or related illnesses. And somehow it's reassuring to me in that memory care, the places I know are and respectful, and they help you with hospice and the hospice nurse, and so but I often feel what gets left out of this equation is what's the end goal here? For me, I want Roger to have a loving death. That's, this is a terminal illness, and we shouldn't have to dance around it. And there are all kinds of physical components after you deal with all the cognitive stuff, which is earlier on, which can be entertaining and frustrating and unusual. You hit some real physical realities that you can have home health care, the adult day programs. That's another loss with COVID is, not in the north suburbs. You have to go to downtown St. Paul, and that wasn't true before COVID, but I'm hoping they'll come back because that's life-giving for caregivers. So these are the things that, all the social workers I've known from Wilder and Family Means and Ling Bloomston, caregiver support groups are just critical. Those are how to support yourself through this time, and I want to say all the way through,
Mm-hmm. I love your phrase. I want to get through this journey, and you need the spiritual muscle.
Yeah,
that's a really nice way to be able to put that, because you just can't do it alone. I mean, you just having that spiritual support, no matter what you believe in, but just to not feel alone on the journey, I think is really can help so many people through this process. Before we continue, I'm just going to take a quick break and let people know that we are talking with Mary, who is caring for her husband Roger, and Paula, whose husband Jack also has dementia, who she's caring for, but she is a health and wellness coach, and the two of these ladies actually work together, so they have a really good feeling of being in sync, and both really understand the journey of dementia. And Paula has a website called Co-Create, and then the number 4 life, so co-create4life.com. She's also on Facebook, and we'll also give you her email, and Mary can be contacted through her LinkedIn page, and we'll have all that stuff in the show notes for you. When I take this little break, I always like to give a little shout out to my buds at Q for Good. They are my webmasters. They are my lifeline. Feel kind of like they're my coach for technology in a way, but they truly understand myself, that I don't want to dive deep into all the tech terms and processes, and can just really guide me and take care of things and speak my language, which means so much to me. So if you're looking for a good webmaster, check out Q for Good. You can actually get a 10% discount if you mention my name or Alzheimer's Speaks as well. But they are absolutely fabulous, communicate wonderfully. So let's go back to our show here. And Mary, I'm going to pull you in again, because in addition to Paula's coaching, you had mentioned some other resources that you went through. One of them was, I think it was the Caregiver Roadmap that doesn't exist. And, I've experienced Mary in our support group, like she's been scrounging for this program to be able to share it with others. And it just kind of went kapoof. And it's so sad when there are wonderful things out there that can really, really help people, and they go away. And I don't know necessarily all the ins and outs. I'm sure some of it's budget, some of it could be staff changes, but it's really sad when good things get lost in the mix. And I would really just encourage individuals and companies and organizations to really evaluate what it is you are doing. And even if you're going to retire, pass it on to somebody else. Don't just take it with you, because it can still help even if it's time for you to step out and breathe new life into it. Was there other things that have really helped you as far as resources, Mary?
So many things. But I just will add, I feel really fortunate I started this journey before COVID, when people met in person. And I think that when Lori, your podcast is so great that I just encourage people to, we're almost at a point of hybrid. So for example, in Minnesota, the suburb of Roseville has a really great Alzheimer dementia community, and they put on programming once a month at Roseville City Hall, and they're excellent speakers. And whenever I would find an excellent speaker or an excellent topic, I would go. So it was easier for me back when everything was, the Alzheimer's Association had a magnificent annual conference. That hasn't come back, but they have an Alzheimer connection chat feature, which is great. If you have a specific question, type it in and you get multiple people with really valuable insight. The other thing, sorry to jump around a little bit, is that I did a lot of respite programs, and part of my to get the 4 hours away for myself, but also Roger was a runner and had running friends, but he wasn't a real social guy, and I really felt it was in my best interest to socialize him, to get him in groups. And I'm so glad I did, because I really do think it has made his life easier in memory care, that he kind of knows the activities. Now we're all going to do exercise, and we're going to do art, and we're going to, these types of things. So for the caregiver that says, well, I don't really need a break. Well, but maybe your wife or husband, they need some connection outside of you, and so I offer that. We also did Spark is a free art class for people with Alzheimer's and their caregivers that meets the second Thursday at Silverwood Park in St. Anthony. We'll love that. We did do Connecting Voice, and now it's Giving Voice. We did Giving Voice, and now, which is its own organization it's choir, it's music for people with Alzheimer's and their caregivers. And we've done Connecting Voices, which is run through McPhail. But I just really valued the really great experiences that we had for as long as we had them, and we still, we're working out our Netflix shows. We're still, we still got some life, and we just did a semester of Connecting Voice. So Roger still likes to sing. I have to say, it was so funny. The last two practices we did, he developed a falsetto voice I never knew he had. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why he's doing it, but it was like, you never know. But what's nice is to do an activity where I'm not leading it and somebody's leading us, and also giving us a focus as a couple, and singing brings so much, to you. So I just say, keep searching, and once again, the social workers at Ling Bloomston will say, well, have you tried Connecting Voice? And then you'll hear about that. It might fit for you, it might not. But, it's you develop a network of people that know people. Lori, you are the best in terms of resources. And I go to a caregiver support group Lori facilitates, and it is just every month. It's whatever somebody brings, she's got suggestions and knows where to go. So appreciative of that.
Well, and so much of what I learn is through the support groups. And there's a lot of times I don't know and other people know, so it's always about learning and being open to, hey, anybody got some ideas here, and our group does a really nice job of listening, and everyone's so appreciative, to all the different types of ideas, because there's not, and this is my belief, there's not one method or one toolkit. You need a big toolkit with all kinds of different information, because this journey twists and it turns, and what works today isn't going to work tomorrow, or it might not work in 5 minutes from now, and so you need a little something else up your sleeve. So thank you for sharing that. Paula, I want to talk to you about needs that you see that people have in terms of their caregiving journey. And I know that you wrote a book of self-care strategies for family caregivers. So I want to know how people can get a hold of that, and if you can give us some tidbits from that as well of what they could expect.
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to. That book is starting to age. It was written in 2019, and it's not specifically for Alzheimer's caregivers, but for family caregivers, regardless of the diagnosis that they're confronting. And basically, our culture talks about self-care as if it was a day at the spa, and this has nothing to do with a day at the spa. The book covers 5 arenas for self-care, including your educational needs. What do you need to know about this diagnosis so that you can be informed and be an advocate for your family member? Where are you going to get that education? Talks about your emotional needs. That's a place where family members are often very afraid to go. Talks about your spiritual needs. As Mary said, you need to work that muscle to get through the endurance race that caregiving can be. It talks about your interpersonal, your network needs, how to build a team, how to put around you that reinforcing set of people who know what you don't, can help when you need them. And that is something, asking for help is probably one of the most difficult things my clients encounter. So it's 5 different arenas of life where any caregiver, any family caregiver, needs to explore so that they are well prepared for this incredibly difficult journey. Joe Gogler at the University of Minnesota did a nice meta-analysis, especially looking at caregivers whose family member has a neurodegenerative disease, like dementia, like Alzheimer's. And that study found that 18% of caregivers will die before the patient, not realizing the level of stress that they will encounter as caregivers. And so finding ways to, first of all, call out that stress, to name it, to give it a platform, and then to begin to address it in a healthy way. I put together a course, and Mary's taken it, so she can speak to what it contains, but it's 6 modules online that look at, the topic is Overwhelmed to Overjoyed, Caregiver Transformation Through Self-Care. And I truly believe that when we have the tools of self-care, we are able to be bolstered through this journey, even though it can be a very treacherous kind of road that we're on. And I think my definition of self-care is probably different than most people would offer. I say that self-care is every conscious action you take that feeds your soul, nourishes your body, nurtures your spirit, or replenishes your relationship with yourself. And very often in caregiving, I find that my clients have lost themselves in the responsibilities of caregiving. So I coach both family caregivers, that's who the book is intended for, and I coach clinicians, having come out of a clinical discipline and knowing what the stressors are for burnout among health professionals.
Wow, that sounds like a wonderful book and a wonderful course to take. When you had said about nurturing yourself, I would also add to that in nurturing your relationships. And the reason I say that is because I didn't even consciously know I was pushing friends away, but I knew that they were bugging me when they called, because I didn't have time to go have coffee. And I've told this story a zillion times, but I always hear, there's always different people listening. And every week the girls would get together for coffee, and I would like, no, 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 no. And then one day I was just having a really bad day caring for both my folks. And I'm like, okay, I'll come. I'll give you 10 minutes. Roll out the red carpet. Here I come, and don't forget to curtsy and bow. I mean, I just had just a horrible attitude. And the only reason I said yes was because I wanted to get them off my back, because I couldn't handle another task on my plate. And I looked at my friendships as a task. Everything had turned into a task. It was on my checklist, and it was overwhelming. And I ended up going, I stayed 2 hours, and we laughed and we cried together. And I never missed a coffee, because it wasn't until I met with my friends that I realized how empty my soul was. I wasn't in a position to be able to see that. And the world was just so blurry, and I was just so busy with taking care of everyone else. I didn't have myself on the list. I wasn't aware of how my body had changed. And, when you sit back, you can tell. It's like, oh, wow, this is happening because of that. And so meeting with my friends and reconnecting with them and nourishing those relationships and not feeling guilty for doing that. That's a big hurdle I think a lot of people have to get over too, because you feel like you're not, you shouldn't be a priority, that there's all these other things that you have to do, but you don't realize that you can do things better when your soul is full. And you can put things into perspective. And I know for me, I just got into that blurry line of going 100 miles down the road and get out of my way. I'm coming. I got things to do. I mean, that was kind of my attitude. And yet on the outside, I looked calm. I looked in control, but my insides were going, wah, but I didn't show that, or I didn't show that to, I didn't think I showed that. I did learn later, I actually had clients, I used to sell real estate. And after my dad had passed, and same with my mom, I met with these clients, and they said, oh my gosh, you have the most beautiful blue eyes. And I said, oh, thank you. And the woman said, I never saw those before. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? My eyes have always been, they're blue, green, and I'm kind of doing that. And she's like, no, Lori, your eyes were always pitch black, because I was so intense with so much stuff on my mind. And that was like, wow. She's like, they just sparkle now. And I thought, wow, I did not see that. I did not notice that. And others did, but nobody said anything to me with that. I thought that was really, really interesting. This has just been a fascinating conversation with the two of you guys. I mean, this has been a really nice balance of how do you get help and what's out there, and what are some of the hurdles to go over. And a lot of them, I think, are just in our head, that we don't reach out, or we don't know how to find them. And I'll just give Dementia Map a plug. And Paul, I'd love for you to register in that as well. We've got about 150 categories, and we're just growing it slowly by word of mouth. But we need to connect people to services, products, and tools. And people who aren't necessarily right in your neck of the woods can still help you if they're over in Europe or whatever. There's so many resources, but we have to connect people to them. So, and then I would say also, don't be afraid to talk about your journey, because we'll never get the help that you need if we don't hear the true story of what the needs are out there. And so we need honest, authentic conversations like what we had today. And that can be, it doesn't have to be on a podcast. It could be having coffee with a friend or somebody at church, or, somebody you just met that's having a tough day. Share resources, get educated, because even if you don't need this information today, you probably will tomorrow, or you'll know of someone who did. The other thing I want to just highlight is, Paula, you had mentioned with your book that it's not just dementia related. And I too have written a book like that called Betty the Bald Chicken. And what I didn't realize when I wrote the book was I thought it was dementia related. But there's so many overlaps in all types of care. And so, don't limit yourself to thinking it has to be dementia related to help you, or that you can't pass something on that you learned through dementia, because they really are universal things. I mean, I tell people all the time, my mom's journey, though I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, taught me so many beautiful life lessons, and is probably the biggest gift I'll ever receive in my life, because I think it's made me a better person. So don't be shy about sharing what you know, even when you think, well, what do I know? You know more than Bob and Joe, and you probably know less than Sue and Sally. That's okay. That's the world we live in, and that's never ever going to change. But don't lessen yourself and think you don't know, because there's so much you have learned through experience and through the resources that you've been tapped into. And if you can give somebody a hand up, please do that. I would encourage you also we have a thing on Alzheimer's Speaks, and we've just expanded it to Dementia Map, saying, be a giver of hope. And we have logos now that you can download. You can put it in your email, on your website, on your Facebook page, wherever you want. But it just says, share resources, tell your story, and give hope. It's very simple. It doesn't cost any money to do that. But it's very compassionate and humane, and it's life-changing for so many. So, ladies, thank you so much for being with us today. Any last thoughts, Mary, that you have?
Well, just real briefly, I'm in such a better place with all the support, and especially with Paula, like have her on retainer when I need her, and that's helpful. But I feel like you, Lori, like this has changed my life. I'm learning life lessons I wouldn't have if I hadn't had this experience, and that I still have the energy that, and I know Paula is writing another book, but at some point after Rogers dies, where can I contribute to this field based on, because I knew what worked for me, and like, if it's not there, let's recreate it, or let's make sure that the practitioners know this was really helpful. Thank you. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Paula, anything else you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
No, I think you've covered a lot of ground in this, and I really appreciate the opportunity to join you and your guests for this conversation. One of the things that I'm trying to twist Mary's arm to do is to become a circle keeper with me, because I think people who have cared for spouses with dementia experience a different sort of grief than when you're caring for other family members. Marriage is a curious bond, and when Alzheimer's climbs into the midst of that, it can be very, very disruptive on a lot of levels. And I think that all that I've learned from Mary in the years that we've worked together, I think she'd be a fabulous circle keeper with me for those other spouses who are encountering dementia loss.
Oh, I agree. I agree. She's definitely a leader, and she just comes off so kind and authentic and compassionate and just full of knowledge. I mean, she walks around and you can almost hear it slosh,
Yeah. Well, the one thing I've been really ruminating a lot is I'd like somebody to open a memory care where spouses can live with their spouse, and we get so rigid into you're the caregiver and you hand your person over and then you're the outsider. And it's such a cruel way. I think it's so unnecessary. So that's something I have been doing a lot of thinking about. If I were creating a memory care, I would like for there to be a memory care for spouses that is, and other families. It's just more family centered so it's not this horrible handoff the way that it presents so often right now. So
yeah, I had met a gal, this was years ago. I did a conference down in Florida, and her husband had dementia, and they were builders. And she actually designed, she did a whole, plan. And basically it was like one level cottages like we have here in Minnesota, kind of in a circle. And so people would park on the outside, but the inside people could roam around. And there was all different types of things in the middle that they could do. And she just could not get any developer to bite on that. And, and, it would cut costs down, and maybe businesses don't want that, but I mean, you're still going to have income, for a couple to live there. And if people were doing home care, they could even use the same company, which could reduce costs there and be more efficient for a healthcare company as well. And people would probably watch one another's peeps, if they had to run out, because you know how to handle it. You know what they do. You can go out to dinner, you can play cards, you can do puzzles, you can go for walks, whatever it might be. There's that communal sense. And I think that's a huge missed market. And for the life of me, I don't know why that is not being realized. And in Minnesota, her concept would be a little bit difficult just because of our winter weather. It's not like they've been bad lately. I mean, here we're almost February and we barely have any snow in Minnesota. But to be able to in a warmer climate, it would be really, really ideal. But you could do that within a building as well, and still pull that off. And they're building them right and left, but it just seems like they're building what everyone else is building. And I think they would be extremely popular, because right now you have to either walk down the hall or go to another building within a campus, or you're driving miles from your home, to go see somebody. And the trauma and the drama of all of that really adds up and takes a toll. So thank you.
I might just add to Mary's wisdom on that, that you need really a government advocate, because so many of our assisted living and memory care programs are run under very strict regulation. You would be astonished at the books of regulation that they function under. And we would really need that kind of political advocacy where literally the federal government would need to be able to do a waiver of some of their rules to permit the kind of creative housing that you're discussing. But the level of restriction is oppressive.
Well, and they might be able to get under like even a 55 and over community where this is just your primary, source. That's
unless there's services, and then in Minnesota they fall under the legislation of housing with services. And again, if you want those services covered by any kind of federal waiver, you've got to be in CMS compliance, and it's just very difficult.
Which is too bad, because really what we're talking about is something that they're just dabbling in right now. But to me, a lot of what we're talking about is really social prescriptions, you know, and
The social determinants of health.
yep.
And it would seem to me that what would be fun to do and not call it anything in healthcare domain would be to do a Golden Girls with 3 families
Mm-hmm.
who knew and understood each other and were willing to go that extra mile of saying, absolutely, you can go spend the weekend with your family because we're here for him.
Yep. Well, again, what a fascinating conversation. Ladies, thank you so much. Again, we
Thanks,
will have
Lori.
all their contact information in the show notes for you, and feel free to reach out to both Mary and Paula. Again, thank you so much. You're just a wealth of information. And I know you've got mind spitting and not spitting, spinning and filling them full of hope of what is possible on this journey. So thanks, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.
What a great show. Mary and Paula were so filled with so much information. I hope you follow up with each of them. And please remember to check out alzheimersspeaks.com as well. We have a ton of free educational resources there, as well as you can check out Dementia Map, and that's just dementiamap.com. There's a blog, there's resources you can look up, there's glossary of terms and so much more. And last, again, I would really encourage you all to be a giver of hope. Like, click, and share this episode. You know, it doesn't take much time. It doesn't cost you a thing, but I'm sure there's somebody in your sphere of influence. If it's Facebook, if it's Twitter, if it's LinkedIn, whatever, that could use this information. Don't deny them of that. Help them get connected. Give them some hope. Bye now.